Okay, everyone. So this week we're going to wrap up kind of the core set of things that we've been talking about, this theme that I've been talking about for most of the semester, which is this idea that in creating our web applications and visualizations, we want to try to factor out all of the different pieces that we're dealing with, mostly to make them easier to deal with and to reduce the likelihood of errors. So early on, we started with our HTML page, and in that HTML page, we had a bunch of JavaScript. We also had CSS, or rather styles that were applied directly to divs, and then we started factoring those out into a style tag, and now we have them in a separate file. As you may have noticed, we still have quite a bit of JavaScript actually in our file. We're going to move that today. But also the last piece that we want to factor out is data. So up until now, we've been working with pretty small sets of data. So if I look at my example right now, which I've modified to look to be similar to what you all have done for the assignment for Friday, I have two charts here. I've got them both in call MD6 bootstrap containers. So I can see that if I have a decently sized window, they're going to float side by side. As I scale that window down, they stack naturally. And now the question is, what if I'm dealing with a larger set of data? So what I really want to be doing is getting all of my JavaScript and I want to get my JavaScript out of my HTML file, and I want to get my data kind of out of that JavaScript file. Now, the data is still JavaScript, right? We're still formatting it in JavaScript. This is a list of lists. That's JavaScript. But I want to, what I want to do is I want to get that into its own separate file so that I'm not, so that again, if I make changes to my data, I don't inadvertently screw up something in my JavaScript, right? So, I mean, there's value in the fact that we have a set of functions and a bunch of JavaScript that's working now. What we want to be able to do is make modifications to the data without the risk that we're somehow going to break the rest of it, right? The worst case scenario is that our data is wrong and needs to be, it needs to have troubleshooting, and not that we've somehow bollocksed up our actual coding, right? So it does this an advantage also because we know if it was working with one data set but not with the next one, we know where to look for the problem, right? We know it's in the data and not in some error that's been introduced into our scripting. So to kind of illustrate why this is useful / necessary, we're going to work with some larger sets of data. I have obviously been using a very, very minimal data set here, also the same data. But first what I want to do is demonstrate how we can factor out this data, and then how we can work at getting other data that we would want to actually, getting how we would actually craft larger sets of data to include in our visualizations, right? Because typing out your data by hand is not so bad when you got, 3 or 4 or even 10 or 12 data points. But when it starts to get to be more than that, you're really approaching an issue where we want to find a way to automate that and make it more efficient. So the thing that I want to point out here is that my data here, so if you think back to when we did our for loops way, way long ago, right? If we remember our for loops way back here, we did this thing when we created our for loops, which is that we created this variable current article to stand in for article list counter, right? And we did this because current article, because although we can always have article list counter, it's a little hard to read. And when we created this local variable, we did so in such a way that we did it mostly to make our later code more readable, right? So when we saw current article.source, it's like, all right, that's the one that I'm looking at right now. Whereas article list brackets counter is like, what is that again? So the point is basically that anytime I have this, I can always add a variable to help make my code more readable and also to be able to refactor it. So the great thing about variables is that they stand in seamlessly for actual references. And in this case, the thing that we're going to create a variable for is actually our data itself. Okay, so you see here, I have my data, which is my list of lists. Currently, I'm passing it quite directly into the add rows recipe, right? Like you can see right there what the data is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable, and again, this is going to have a better name when you all do it, but I'm going to say something like list data, for me. And I'm just going to copy the contents of this, right? I'm going to actually cut it from there and paste it in here, right? So now I have created a box called list data. I put my list of lists in there. And now when I want to draw my chart, I can just say, by the way, the stuff that should go in there is the stuff that's in list data. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. So I'm going to just say here, I want to create a variable to hold my data. And then okay, so I'm creating this variable, and what that means is that, you know, if I need to adjust my data, I can do so here. So I just want to reload my page, demonstrate that this works, right? No big deal. I'm going to do the same thing in my second chart function, and again, I could actually call it the same thing here. So I'm going to say var list data equals, right? So you'll notice that the only thing that's changing here is that I do, because this is now its own sentence, I do have to add the semicolon at the end. And then I put list data in here. Okay? So again, just confirming that this works, because I always feel better knowing that it works. Everything's working fine. Okay. So, this comment is now in the wrong place. So that's all well and good. Okay. But I'd prefer to do something even more I'd prefer to get it even further out, right? Because at some point I'm going to want to use more than 3 columns of data. So let's think about an example. I would like to add, first of all, I'm going to make my visualizations into bar charts instead of pie charts. So I'm just going to quickly come in here and say bar chart, and let's make this one a bar chart 2 just for kicks. I also want to change my comment here. Came up for a couple of you. You want to make sure that you change your comments to reflect changes to your code. Otherwise, the comments are extra confusing, which is even worse than having them. Not be there in some cases. Okay. Viola, bar chart. So this works fine if I've got a few data points, and I can easily go in and manually change my titles and my data. But, you know, we are working in contexts where we might well be dealing with larger sets of data, 10, 20, 30 data points. At a certain point, as I said, you know, scale becomes an issue. So I decided to look for some data related to refugees. And I wanted to demonstrate this process because it was surprisingly challenging. And that isn't that unusual. So this is the UNHCR's figures at a glance, right? So they have these lovely infographics, right? All of their staff, all of these things. What I don't see right off the bat is any structured data. Okay, so structured data is very often what we're looking for. We're looking for things that are, you know, going to offer us, you know, tables basically of information. Or something that we can construct a table from. So I see down here they have a statistics database that carries statistical reports on people of concern. So I'm going to click on refugees here. And now I get this page and I can make a donation. I see stuff about UNRWA. Not seeing a lot here in terms of how to actually get data. Using stories. They said it was statistics, but that didn't really yield what I was looking for. I did see something up here. Aha, statistical yearbooks. So I'm going to try this. And under statistical yearbooks, it seems that I can do, okay, I can do the online statistical database. That also seems lucky. And again, I've got this visualization, but I'm not really seeing, I can contact stats at unhcr.org if I want more information. And I can see what the color thing is here, but I'm not sure where to actually get this data. I can Pinterest it, but where is the actual data? So what I'm going to do is I saw this tiny little link up here that says mid-year statistics. So this is the data that I am going to work with. So, you know, just to say that in thinking about the kinds of data that is useful to us and accessible to us, we really prefer structured data. So as wonderful as it is, so I guess we also have this, I can actually do an export here on this selection that I made. So let me do 2015. And let's see, country, territorial asylum, or residence. So what are some of the places that we've been talking? So this is, let's look at, so I could say I want to look at all countries of asylum, all regions of asylum. And then I can say Afghanistan. I'm just thinking of some populations that we've talked about in class. Let's see, Cambodia, Colombia. Well, actually, I'm going to look at this for, yeah, okay, no, I'm going to look at this for a bunch of things. I'm just going to keep going. Obviously, we've talked a lot about, let's just add Syria. I probably should have done the, I should do the 7 countries, shouldn't I? But okay, we'll do this example for now. Because all this scrolling is what's, no, okay. So, interesting here, refugees including refugee-like situations, asylum seekers, pending cases, returned refugees, internally displaced persons, returned IDPs, stateless persons, and others of concern. So again, not a lot here on the actual meaning of these, but I'm going to, oops, hope that, oh, statistic filters. Okay, so there's a failure of an interface. Skip it. I'm going to go back to my my stats, my download here. So lots of ways in which this could be improved. I also love that I get this error when I open up the Excel spreadsheet. So just to say that we recognize that obviously getting the data is the important part and not something, or is a very significant aspect of doing this work, not something to be taken for granted, which is one of the reasons why we require that you all actually have data in hand before you, when you're pitching your final project stories, right? Because as you've already begun to experience, and is very much the case, not non-obvious to get good data even when it seems like it should be available, or when it is allegedly available. So here's the list of tables. We could look at table 11, which is spontaneous refugee arrivals. Okay, so wow, this is a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to pick, let's just look at table 1. Okay, so here I have a much longer list of data. I'm going to just go ahead and choose, the first, let's say 20 rows of this. Okay, and again, I'm doing this to kind of illustrate what happens when I need to deal with large quantities of data. So if I copy this out, the question is, I have data in an Excel spreadsheet. The issue is that I have data in an Excel spreadsheet, and I need to get it into a list of lists. How am I going to go about doing that? What we're going to do is we're going to use a series of tools that's going to help us get it into a list of lists. And then more importantly, we're going to factor that out into a separate JavaScript file so that we can separate it from the rest of our code. So I'm going to pause here. When we return, we're going to look at what are the steps we can take when dealing with Excel data to get it efficiently into a format that we can actually use to visualize it.